Hi, everyone. Welcome to the Self-Publishing Tips and Tricks Show, a series designed to give you insight and marketing strategies into the world of publishing your books. I'm one of your co-hosts, Ben Pick, and I'm here with my other co-host. Please introduce yourselves.
I'm Morgan Lee.
And I'm Shannon, writing under the pen name SD Huston.
Thanks. We were originally scheduled to have author Aphrodite Lee on today's show, but she couldn't make it due to some scheduling issues. So we're here today with Nissa Leder, and we're going to ask her questions about her own self-publishing journey and how she markets her books. But before we jump into the interview, do you all have any updates or new information?
The only thing I have is I'm still working on book 2 and 3 of my dark fantasy trilogy. The goal is still to release at the end of quarter 2, maybe beginning of quarter 3. So I'm still working on that.
And to add to that, Morgan, right, we're exchanging pages probably still at this point. This interview comes out March 1st. So our chapters, we're exchanging chapters. Yeah. So that's what I'm reworking a whole big sections in my novel and getting them out to Morgan. And I have one other critique partner I'm exchanging chapters with as well. So that's what I'm working on. And I will, at this point, I'm still working at my parents' liquor store. So my YouTube channel output will be probably a little bit lower as far as other videos coming out. But I think I've kind of covered that in a previous video. But I'm hoping that my writing output increases during this time period.
Cool. Yeah, there's nothing really new on my side. I got a couple of things that I'm sort of holding off on announcing, but stay tuned because it's going to be pretty interesting. Now let's talk about our guest today. Nissa Leder is the author of the fast-paced fantasy novels, including her best-selling Whims of Fae series. When not imagining magical worlds or writing scenes, she's likely playing tennis or spending time with her husband, their little munchkin, and their fur babies. Loving that. And let's bring her in. Welcome, Nissa.
Hi.
Would you take a few minutes just to introduce yourself or share anything that I forgot or you want to add to?
Yeah, I mean, I love to write books and fantasy, young adult fantasy is kind of the main lane I've been in, minus a couple little, divots out. But I've been writing since college. I'm kind of one of those people that loved to read as a kid, but didn't write right away. And have been writing ever since and love it. And just had my first baby last year. He's almost 8 months old. So big adjustment there, and we're settling in. And I live in Arizona, so really good weather and stuff most of the year, except for the summers. So this time of year is really nice, a little harder to want to sit down and write, but it's been really good.
Congratulations. Yeah, it sounds like you missed that massive 2,000-mile ice storm or whatever that ran through the whole country. So
thankfully.
Glad to hear. Yeah. So before we jump into questions of self-publishing and marketing your books, could you tell us what made you want to start writing? You said you didn't start off as a kid, but where was that really dividing line?
Yeah, it was early undergrad when I was like trying to figure out kind of what I wanted to do. And I'd always been just such an avid reader. I love books, and I mean, would start a book and had a hard time doing anything else until it was finished. And I think I just took a creative writing course and fell in love with the writing process. It was really a lot different because I was used to maybe academic writing and not the creative writing. And so it was a challenge, but a lot of fun and didn't feel like work. And I think just the idealist dreamer in me was like, you know what, let's be crazy, let's be a writer. And then just kind of went with it. Didn't know my exact path at that moment where it would lead me, but majored in English and then got my MFA after that and really dug into the creative process there. And haven't really looked back since.
That's amazing. So can you tell us a little bit about the journey that you took to self-publishing your first book? What was it like?
Yeah, I knew kind of I wanted to write at this point when I was obviously in my MFA. And after I graduated, spent about a year really working on what was my thesis there, and sat down and was like, okay, what do I want to do with this? And I'd known a lot about traditional publishing at that point, just from like contacts I had at school, and like the school I went to definitely like had a lot more information on the traditional side. So I felt pretty versed in how that would work and the querying and everything. But I had never queried. I just was waiting until I kind of felt like I had, my novel at the right place. So once I was there, I then kind of started digging into the self-publishing side. And I'm very like, my personality is like always kind of in the middle of things. Like, I don't take a hard way one way or another on many things. And so with that, like I grew up really loving math, and, for a while thought marketing would be maybe something I could go into before I picked the creative writing, and kind of just fell in love with this idea that I could do everything myself in a weird way. Like it was really intimidating, but I liked that, like I could take control. And I just knew so many writers at that point that had queried for years and just were struggling. And I decided I didn't want my writing to ever feel that type of struggle. Like for me, I think rejection in that sense would have been really difficult. And I wanted it to be positive and something I always felt I was moving forward with, and just kind of decided to jump in and see where it went, and have never really looked back. I've really loved the process of learning it all. It's definitely difficult, and I've had struggles, but yeah, I think once I kind of made up my mind at that point, I just dove in, and it's been a journey. But that kind of was the deciding factor, was the control and just getting a book out there to a reader and then taking the next step after that.
So I think you pretty much answered my question, which was, how did you make the decision to self-publish versus traditionally publish? So
Yeah.
maybe I can modify it slightly. Like, was there a moment, like, at what point was that moment? Was it like after you wrote your first book when you said, yep, I am going to self-publish and not traditionally publish?
Yeah, so it was when I had it was my first finished novel. It was my thesis for my MFA, and it was to a point that I felt was about as good as I could get it at that moment. And so that's when I felt ready to make my decision. I think for me, it was really a matter of feeling confident in the story that I had. And from there, it was just kind of researching the pros and cons and where like my personal like preferences fit. So it was definitely, I had a completed manuscript, and was ready to take the next step with it, which when I did decide to self-publish it, I then hired a freelance editor and started that whole process. So the book definitely wasn't done when I made that decision fully, but I'd been working on it probably about 2 years, and really kind of fine-tuning, just learning a lot about writing in general before I felt ready.
Would you ever consider traditionally publishing?
I think if it was the right circumstance, I think I'm really in love with the control of everything, be it from the cover to the timeline to how many books can be. So for my young adult fiction, it would have to be, some deal that really felt like it added a benefit to me, because I like that control. But I think if I ever, decide to write a picture book, because my MFA was in writing for children and young adults, and I've always leaned towards the young adults, but I definitely have learned a lot about writing picture books, and that's something that I could see myself, especially with little one, deciding to pursue if I ever had the right story. And that's a particular market that I think I would maybe go the traditional route, like try that and see where that went before I would self-publish. But for my young adult writing, or any adult writing or anything like that I do in the future, it would surprise me that I wouldn't go out of my way to go that route. If something came to me, I'd never say never by any means, but it's not something I'm seeking with my current writing.
Did you have anyone or anything in particular that inspired you to self-publish your books?
I think there wasn't really anyone or any one particular thing. I think it was just that aspect of getting a book out there and taking the reins in my own hands, and seeing an assortment of other indie authors do that with success. And I don't think I ever felt the need to put out a book and have it take off and that be the instantly happen. I think I saw other authors putting out books and connecting with readers and doing everything I wanted to do, and the scale didn't matter as much to me. So there wasn't any one particular person, but just seeing other people take that path and it work for them, I think was really inspiring.
So what is one misconception that you had about self-publishing before you published your work?
I think that I didn't really have like a misconception. I think before I published, had seen it work for people, but I think that it was a little intimidating. And it's not that that's changed, but I think through the process of it, I've learned sort of managing what I can and going from there. So I think at first it was a little bit like overwhelming, like, oh my gosh, am I really going to take on all of this myself? And I'm kind of like grew up learning from my mom to think outside the box. So I don't think I was ever like, oh, this is just something I can't do. But I think that the intimidation of it all was something that once I actually started, didn't feel as big, when I just would remind myself like one step at a time. But I think before like kind of pulling that trigger, it was really intimidating. Like, oh, my book needs to be perfect and everything. So I think after actually starting, I actually kind of calmed down maybe a little bit.
Good. And hopefully it got progressively easier as you went along. In your opinion, what's been your greatest publishing success?
I think my Whims of Fae series, partly because it's done the best for me, but mostly because it was a longer series and I definitely started it and finished it faster than like book average than my first series, because my first series, that first book had taken a couple years. So when but I already at that point knew the world that I was building, knew kind of like where the next plots were going at least a little bit. So I had some ideas before I started releasing my first series. So when I started my second series, Whims of Fae, I was able to, I think I averaged about 4 books a year for that series. So it's 6 books. So it took about a year and a half, maybe a little bit more. And so I was really proud that I kind of stuck and kept moving forward. Even at times it felt slow to me when in the world of rapid release and all this stuff, but I actually kept to a schedule for the most part and kept it moving forward. And then I also think that beside that, that's probably been the series that's done the best, has been really encouraging.
So what has been your least favorite part of your writing to publishing journey so far?
I think kind of along the opposite of what I just said, but like having to be my own boss at times can be overwhelming because I'm not always the best deadline meter. So I think the hardest part and my least favorite part is that I have to show up every day only for myself and not because somebody else is expecting something. The readers are expecting it to come out. So I know I need to do stuff and get it done when I say, but like, I can procrastinate really easily. So I can be like, well, if I don't write today, I can just write twice as much tomorrow, right? And then I just don't want to write tomorrow because I'm way overwhelmed. So I think that is my least favorite part, is just having to manage the time aspect of the writing the first draft. So that getting those first words down, that can sometimes be a struggle. So it can be hard to meet my own goals if I'm not really disciplined, which I'm not always.
I have been there where I haven't written anything in a day, and the next day I'm like, yeah, I can just make it up tomorrow. And I get to the next day, I'm like, I have to do how many words? I've been there several times. So, all right. So I want to I have several questions here. You started publishing in 2016, and you had 3 books that first year, then 3 in 2017, and then 5 the next year. And of course, you've continued to release books every year since then. But can you tell us about this experience of writing and publishing so quickly? Like, and what hurdles did you face? How did you overcome them? And what surprised you?
Yeah, so I think that's kind of what I was saying before. The hurdles are definitely the just not pushing things off, like trying to take things a day at a time. which I definitely haven't always done. And especially before having my baby, when I had some time where I was at home, pretty much writing full time, and yet I could just like procrastinate. And then I would get to really close to my deadline and have a really stressful 10 days trying to get things done. So that's been probably the biggest hurdle. I think the best part is that I have proven to myself that I can get things done. And I've kind of learned along the way to not procrastinate as much. I still do, but I've learned some days it's okay to just get a little in and just do that and don't always like push things off. I think that has been kind of the key for me going at the pace that I can go. I've also learned a little bit like more about myself as a writer, and I've had moments where I really thought like, oh, I can write a book a month. Like I have the time, I have the hours in the day that this can happen, but I've had to learn that I can't do that my brain gets fatigued if I'm sitting down writing too long, and that doesn't work for me. So really learning more about myself as a writer and like kind of letting go of that comparison tendency that I had, and remembering I'm a human and I have my strengths and my weaknesses, and that's okay. That just because I have the hours in the day technically to do something doesn't mean that I can do it and live a quality of life that would work for me personally. So just managing that and learning to keep going. And the worst thing I've ever done is try to overdo it, because that gave me some burnout. So I am now back to wanting to do 3 to 4 books a year, like kind of that 4 average, versus thinking I can do more. And, you know, if I ever want to add more, I'm going to go to 5. I'm not going to go to 6, 7, 8. Like I don't need to jump. I can take a small step if I want to maybe push my output, but a little at a time.
Are you comfortable discussing any publishing missteps or anything you would have liked to have done differently if you could go back?
Yeah, I think that the hardest challenge I've had is that burnout. And if I could go back, it would be to kind of stay in one lane. So part of the burnout issue for me was that I tried to do a side pen name and kind of split what I was doing. And while I love the projects I did, they didn't really fit in my long-term goal of publishing under Nissa Leder, my own name. So the burnout happened because I had a good 2-3 months where I was kind of pushing myself to meet that goal that I thought I wanted. And that was early 2020. So when that combined with the pandemic and just the change of everything and some life changes, I moved and some different things, just was really hard to come back from. So in the future, I'm really trying to listen to myself and not be so hard on myself. Still hold myself to a standard that I know I can, like kind of finding that balance of not excusing everything, but also taking like each moment and deciding what is a reasonable goal and what isn't, and how I can learn to better myself. Because it was a good 6+ months before I really even enjoyed writing again. I tried to plow through it and that just didn't work. It made me not like writing, which is what I never want to happen. Like some days I might not want to sit down and write, and I might do it, and that's fine. But if it becomes a chronic, I just don't want to sit down and write, then I need to step back, like settle, and then wait until I'm excited about my stories again.
That's amazing. Sounds like you've learned so much about yourself over the course of your writing career. So I find that really interesting and really fascinating. So what kind of advice do you have for self-published authors from the moment that they hit publish on their books?
I think taking one step at a time is important, because it's really easy to see other people at a certain point and just want to be there and want to do all the things right now that they're doing or that you hear other people are doing, instead of kind of looking at where you're at and what's the next bite you can take, like, and not overwhelm yourself, because it can really be overwhelming when you're doing everything yourself, like, you know, finding your own freelancers, doing your own marketing, writing your own books, you know, newsletters, everything. So for me, I think my advice is to take it one step at a time and decide, like, okay, I want to learn ads. but which ads do I want to learn first, and start there. And then, okay, I'm going to put out one ad and see how it does, not like just jump into the point where they're overloading themselves. And I think that would be something I'm doing better now, but it's not always. Sometimes I still like to try and do all the things, and I have to remember not to do that.
I think that's some great advice. And it can be kind of hard because you do want to know everything. You're like, I want to put out my book and be as successful as I can possibly be. So it's hard to say, okay, you're only human. Let's one step at a time, figure out what to do right now. So it's great advice. So as you mentioned, you became a mom for the first time last year. How has that affected your writing and publishing schedule? Like, what challenges have you faced and how have you overcome them?
So when I got pregnant, I was kind of in my burnout phase. So that's kind of like I was in the burnout, got pregnant, and then sort of that was very distracting to be, excited. Okay, I need to start making my registry and like, learning stuff and everything, especially being a first-time mom. It was like, I need to learn all the things right now, right? Don't follow my own advice on learning the things about that. But then I kind of started to get back into writing, which was good. And so then I didn't, I don't think I think it was about a good year, a little more than a year between publishing things, between the pen name I kind of started and I'm not currently doing and my Nissa Leder books. So it'd been quite a while, and I was in the middle of a series, and I decided about 3 weeks after having Grayson that I just needed to get that last book in that series done, finished, and so I could start on a new series. And I think that was the series I was really excited to write, this new one that I'm working on. And so at first it wasn't too bad because I had a baby that slept a lot. But as he's gotten older and, needs more attention all the time, I've been very grateful to have family to help watch him. And it's made me have to dedicate time to writing. So it's like, okay, grandma's going to watch you. My mother-in-law will watch him a lot for me when I go write. And then that's my writing time. And it's hard in some ways because, I'm still not getting the best sleep. I mean, there's a lot of struggles that it's brought, but it's brought a little more structure. So on a positive side, I can't tell myself, well, you can just write later this evening. It's no, this is your 2-3 hours. You need to get some writing and whatever else needs done in this time. And some days that's easier than others, depending on how tired I am. And, just like if something needs done around the house, it's really easy to, well, I'll write in a minute, but first I'm going to go do the dishes or go do laundry or whatever it may be. So it's still kind of a work in progress, but the days I'm really successful are the days I plan my writing time and I do my writing in that time. And that's very different than when I had all day and I just could keep putting it off. So very big.
Kind of reminds me.
That's kind of both positive and more difficult.
So it kind of reminds me of the Six Figure Authors podcast. I don't know if any of you guys have listened to it, but there's one author on there, Andrea Pearson, who talks about how she became more productive when she had kids because she had just those certain writing times to get everything done.
Yeah, it's definitely a big change. And for me, has added some positive, like that exact thing. So more challenges, but also positive.
Tanner has produced your audiobooks. Can you tell us a little bit about how that process went or your overall experience with them?
Yeah, so they reached out to me for my Whims of Faith series where I had 4 books out. And at that time, I kind of had to decide if that was a route I wanted to take to have the audiobooks published by someone else. And audio wasn't something that I really felt I had the time to learn about and do at that moment. So I thought that was a really great opportunity. And it was really easy to do. They were really easy to work with. My cover art, I hire an illustrator that does the illustrations for a lot of my cover art on my books, but then she gives me a PSD file and I turn them into covers. And then I have full commercial use of all of the illustrations. So I was able to like pass those along to them, and then they just turned them into the audiobook size. And yeah, they gave me, I think I loved the first narrator that they sent me, Jesse, and it was just really easy for me, that I didn't have this need to control as much. So I think that it was just really smooth and easy. Now, the only 4 are out so far. Since then, my series hasn't been doing as well. Just like lack of releasing and some different, and like the burnout and stuff, my ads have fallen back and all those things. So at this time, there's just the 4. So we'll see. I, in the future, hope to maybe get that series boosting a little and doing well before I reach out to them to see if they want to do the last 2. So that's probably been the part that I really didn't think about at the beginning, because only 4 books were out. So they only wanted the 4 at that time. And I don't at this moment probably have the time to get the last 2 done, but at some point, if they don't, that's something I would consider. But yeah, it was really overall a very pleasant process, and something I just didn't want to learn and think about at that moment. So that really worked out.
Okay, so you already gave some pretty good advice, but if you could only pass on one thing to self-published authors, what would it be?
I probably just back to that learning your own tendencies. And that can be even more specific kind of for this. I will say, like, learning for myself. I've learned that the hardest part for me is writing that first draft. Once I have words on the page, I don't have the focus issues. I don't have the procrastination issues of wanting to go look at those words and make them better. But that blank page, and I do plot. I'm a plotter, so I already know what's supposed to go there. But like actually, like writing words on a blank page is still the most intimidating process for me. And so I'm learning to just get words on the page, and I have to let go of this idea they have to be great that first time, because for me that doesn't work. That pressure just gives me writer's block. Whereas other people maybe really might hate the editing stage and the tweaking, and so they might want to be more careful that first draft while they're in their writing zone, and then kind of adjust from there. So anywhere from the writing to knowing like, oh, I hate the marketing aspect, and finding the right time of day to fit that, and then the right time to fit the writing in, and really learning yourself, and knowing your own output volume potential, and knowing what's too much. And everything can just be easier if you do it within yourself, instead of trying to be how you want yourself to be versus how you actually are. So I think that is like, it all goes down to that for me, from where I've had the most success versus where I've had the most struggle, is whether or not I'm doing what's within myself and what's too much.
Great advice. So, and I think that's kind of the running theme so far. So it goes right along with everything you've been saying. So we're going to transition now from your publishing to your marketing. What are some of your marketing strategies?
I definitely try and focus first on my covers and my blurbs. I try to focus on them, but I don't know, I think I struggle more with them. I try and start there, because I think if you don't have the right cover, the right blurb, and that could take trial and error, it's hard to know how well your ads are working, because those are the first components. And then after that, I think I'm really still learning the marketing side to a lot of things. And so trying to take that again, like one thing at a time. And it can be really difficult, because I think things are always changing. So when I was really on top of things a couple of years ago, releasing my Limbs of Fae series and doing the ads, I was having a lot of success with Amazon ads, and fairly low cost per click, and getting a fairly high ranking based on the natural, algorithm promotion and the ads both. And since then, once that kind of slowed down and I've tried to replicate that, I have learned that it's not the same. Like, you can't get it. It's harder to get that same result in the way I did it, that things are changing and more authors are bidding and prices are higher and all all those things. So I have to go relearn all that now and see where things are. And I haven't quite done that yet. So I'm kind of on a marketing pause as far as like paid marketing goes for the most part. But I think it's just that it's like everything's constantly changing. You have to be aware of that and don't get too frustrated over that. Cause I definitely at first just felt frustrated that my ads just weren't working the way I wanted anymore. And so I think I did the wrong thing, which was just put them to the side and kind of turn a lot off. And I think it's just being ready for that and expecting it and just going from there is probably the hardest thing, is that the changing, that everything is always changing. And so you can't just learn and be done learning. You have to be prepared to learn the new thing and learn how the thing you just did is changing and everything.
Well, you mentioned some of the things that you wouldn't want to do again, but what was the best money that you spent advertising or marketing your book?
I think probably Amazon ads, when they were working well for me, were really working well. And I think that also going back to the idea of the cover and the blurb, I think I felt really confident in the cover that I had at that moment. And so that was really helping the clicks. And then it took me a little trial to get the right blurb. And once I did that, or once I found one that at least was working better, I found the ads really taking off. Marketing as a whole is something I'm just learning all the time still. So I don't think I've ever felt there's been one big thing that's just went great for a long time. But the thing that's worked the most for me were Amazon ads, but that was a few years ago. And right now I'm not as versed in where they're at.
Okay, so you already mentioned some marketing that you would not do again. So your least favorite marketing. Did you have any other additional marketing that you've tried besides Amazon ads?
I've done some free Booksy ads, and I've had a couple book bugs. One was recently, it was just last fall, and it was on a whole series for 99 cents, and that had some good success, but definitely not maybe the success it would have had a few years ago. So that was, which I was kind of prepared for based on seeing in, Facebook groups and stuff, that things aren't always having the same effect as before. And so I've tried some of those newsletter, like paid newsletter marketing techniques, and I've messed around with Facebook ads a little bit, but that's actually kind of next on my agenda, is to really learn those a little bit more and be willing to take a little risk. I think the Amazon ads, I was drawn to those first simply because I felt like I had more information, and it was more direct. Like if you click on my book on Amazon, you're on my book page. Whereas with the Facebook ads, with the engagement and everything and the clicks, it's just harder to know how well those are doing. And that's been a little intimidating to me. So it's actually kind of my goal in the next 6 months to start doing like a $5 a day ad and just start to learn that and giving myself the permission to fail and then learn. So those are pretty much the only ads that I've really tried so far, the Facebook and the Amazon. And besides that, just like the free Booksy, BookBub, those types of things.
So we're going to move on to a little bit of the soft marketing, which is social media. And our question is, do you feel social media is valuable as an author? Why or why not? And I know, because you've talked my ear off about how I can approach social media to advertise my books. At least this was a few years ago you were telling me. So I don't know if it's still the same, but so do you think it's still valuable today?
I do, yeah. I think it's a great way to both kind of just, you can showcase your books pretty well for me, especially with the young adult fantasy. There's a lot of engagement I can get on Instagram with the Bookstagram hashtag. And so that's been a lot of fun for me to connect with different Bookstagrammers for like cover reveals and different things like that. So I think with my particular market and seeing all these beautiful photos with covers and everything, and that can be really good, I think, for word of mouth and that's probably where I see the most success with the social media marketing. But I just love connecting with people and, you know, getting messages and getting comments and everything with on Facebook and Instagram. Those are the two that I use. I think I have a Twitter, but I don't really use it. I found 2 is kind of, I'm comfortable keeping up with the 2, 3 just to start to be too much for me. So I think since having a baby, I'm not as nearly as interactive in everything as I was before. I'm good at commenting if people comment or anything, but I'm not as good at posting. So I think that's been the struggle for me lately with that. But I definitely am glad I have that way to connect with readers and to promote my books. And it's something I definitely will continue to do.
So I do want to qualify because I didn't want that to come off negative, but when you talked to me about it, you know, quite a bit, I know you were doing that to help me get insight. And I was so appreciative of everything you always said. So I just wanted to say that.
Yes.
Yeah. So you mentioned a couple of social media types that you explicitly use. So I'm not going to ask the original one, but I'm going to tweak it a little bit in terms of, do you have any good tips for using Instagram? You mentioned the Bookstagram tag. Do you have anything else that could really help you help other authors get notoriety for their upcoming books? Or
I think the Bookstagram hashtag is kind of where I've seen the most maybe like word of mouth success. But I think my biggest tip with that is like, don't be intimidated to reach out to different creators, especially for me when I first started. You know, I would just pick creators who were like smaller creators. I definitely find that a lot of people are really excited for an author to reach out to them and definitely want to help with like a cover reveal or, you know, help maybe showcase your cover if it's when it's coming out. There's different strategies for that. And I am no pro by any means, but I think my biggest hurdle was just asking. And I was so surprised how many people were like, oh, I'd love to. And some people, you know, didn't answer. And some people were like, oh, I would love to, but this isn't a good time for me. Don't take it personally. Just, you know, move on to the next. Don't pester people over it. Like, but, you know, asking once and seeing if someone responds. And if they respond once, then the next time you have that, reach out again and ask, you know, if it went well, if they followed through and everything. Don't overwhelm people. Be friendly, but definitely don't be afraid to ask, because I was always intimidated because I guess for me, I'm an author, but like I'm just myself. So I don't think I'm that special. So when I reach out to someone else, I'm like, well, why would they want to help me? Like, who am I? And it's really easy to kind of just forget that, well, they get excited over books and you share that sort of passion in different ways. And a lot of times people are writers as well, that you can reach out to that have bookstagrams. And yeah, or just make a post on your own. And so I've had readers volunteer, and I have fun with that. I think for me, it's really inspiring to see my cover in different images. Like that gets me excited to write. So it's kind of a positive thing when I do the cover reveals, just for excitement and to get other people excited. And yeah, that's probably my biggest tip, is just don't ever be afraid to like ask in a professional, polite way.
Nice. So would you say that your marketing strategy overall has changed or evolved since you became a mom?
Yeah, I think it's kind of crashed and burned a little bit at the moment. So we're still picking up the pieces from that. And starting to be a little bit more planned, I guess, like a little bit more like, okay, I want to try like and do a couple posts a week. And that's very new development this last like couple weeks. I'm starting to like just remind myself to post something and not be maybe as like, don't overthink it. Like just interact with people because it's fun, less so like, does everything have to be about books? No, it's okay to like share where I'm at or what I'm doing in like safe ways. But yeah, I think that trying to keep the writing up has been a change enough that it's been really easy for the marketing to kind of fall to the wayside for me, like with my ads and different things. So I'm in the process of trying to take my own advice of one thing at a time and pick what you're gonna like learn or focus on and then go from there. I had a book released in October that finished up a series, and now I'm starting a new series. So I'm really excited to get back with the engagement and everything on social media with the new series. And then once that's out, I'm really excited to test some ads as well. As once I get this first book out, my writing schedule is going to slow down a little bit, I think, and I'm going to focus on also advertising my finished series, a couple of them. And so I have some good plans that we will see how I can like integrate that. Right now the writing is most important. So I'm still kind of working on getting the marketing in with little one and less time.
I would definitely be interested in knowing when you have the time and you try it out, how you market series that are already done, because I think that is something that a lot of authors face, is like, well, how do I market a series that's done already? How do I bring life back to it? So I'd love to know what you do in the future with that.
I will update you. Hopefully it'll work, whatever I do.
Good luck. So at one point, I know you had a website. I think you even you made it yourself, didn't you? Or what, in the beginning you did, you made your own website, but now it's no longer available. So I was just wondering about that decision to no longer have it.
That decision is, I didn't make a decision. It just went away. I think maybe something didn't get updated right. I'm not sure. I still own the domain and I definitely plan to get that back up soon. But I honestly, in the midst of burnout and having a baby, didn't even notice it was gone. So that's really bad, but really true.
Totally understandable.
So yeah, I think that goes back to the trying to juggle all the balls and figure out what's most important. And for me, getting that back up hasn't been the most important, because I never used it a whole lot personally, and maybe people found me on it, but I tend to post more and keep things more up to date with Instagram and Facebook. So that's why I probably didn't notice. It's not my top priority, but I think having a website for people to find you is important. And I definitely plan to get that back up. But that's an example of life happening and me learning to be okay that I don't have everything perfect at this exact moment.
I have to be honest, right? My website, it doesn't even have my second book up there yet. And it's been out since the beginning of January. So I'm
was like behind.
You're mentioning prioritizing each of the little pieces together, and there are an infinite number of resources and tips out there. How do you funnel it down to be useful to you, or to help maybe prioritize some of your bigger concerns or some of the things that you really want to hone in on, focus?
I think for me, it's figuring out where I'm at and what my goals are in that moment. So, for instance, right now, coming out of this burnout and everything, my focus is falling back in love with writing, falling back into stories. And I'm starting a new series. So this first book in the series, the first book is kind of always the slowest one for me, because I'm figuring out my world. I'm learning my characters a little bit, getting to know them a little bit more, and figuring out the plot, the characters, or like mixing it all together and how that's going to work. And I find sometimes through the course of my writing my first book, like that's the book that has the most surprises and changes, and my characters change halfway through. And I realized, like, wait a minute, you're a lot, spunkier than I thought you were. Or like, oh yeah, that's why you're so guarded. Like I kind of learn as I write. So that's been, that kind of combined with this less time and focused, like little more spurts. Right now, that's my priority. So I think after this book is out, my priority is going to shift a little. I still want to make sure I'm hitting, my goals with the writing, but I might back off a little bit to try and do some marketing in my finished series to see if I can get that income up a little bit. So I think it's a constantly evolving thing for me. And at different times, I want to prioritize different things. And it can be really difficult to sometimes determine that. I think my goal moving forward is to, once I kind of get something going well, like if I'm learning, where Amazon ads are at now, or where Facebook ads are now, and I get really good with it, not letting myself fall so behind again, like making sure that I'm checking in on those more often, even if they're not my top priority. And so that's where I'm at, trying to learn and grow and be better at, instead of like, oh, okay, I've got these ads, they're great, and then moving on and forgetting about them. And by the time I get back to them, they're maybe too far gone, or me being so far out of what's current that I then have to take a lot of effort to catch back up. So that's going to be my goal moving forward. And I think that that's the hard part, is juggling and finding the right thing to do when.
So you already gave us some advice on marketing, but what is one thing you would pass on to aspiring self-published authors that they need to do in regards to marketing?
I think just really kind of going back to that bite by bite thing, like making your goals reasonable, trying to do a small ad and seeing how it does, and building from there, and just taking it a little by little, because otherwise I think it's really easy to get overwhelmed and not expecting success the first time. I think that's probably the thing that holds me back the most, is that I don't want to put up a Facebook ad and have it not do well, because, oh my gosh, I'm wasting money. But like, that's how you learn. And maybe I'll waste some money now, but once I get it down, it can really help my sales. So looking at the long term and like where you want to get, and then taking it one step at a time, and not kind of worrying if things don't always work right the first time.
It's great. I wish there was like someone like every couple months say, hey, this is what's actually working for Amazon ads, or here, this is what's working for Facebook. So we don't have to make the mistakes the first time.
Yeah.
So, all right. So we're going to transition from marketing to your writing life. I know that you have a smaller time period now to write. And I think you kind of maybe already talked about some of this, because right now you're concentrating on writing, but how much time do you spend writing versus the other writing stuff, like editing and finding your readers or reviewers, marketing your books?
I definitely think I spend most of my time writing. Probably 80 or more percent of my time is writing, especially now. That can change. There can be moments where I want to break from writing. And so I might take, a couple weeks fully off, a month off, and focus on marketing. But like in a kind of normal mode, I try and keep writing and keep getting books out, because I think that that's the most important thing. And like, the more books I have, the more ways readers can find me, and the more then backlist I'm creating. And so I think trying to always be moving forward on the books. And so right now, like, it's probably like 90% of my time is writing, and maybe 10% is kind of like starting to learn a little bit more about where some ad stuff is, and doing some social media. And I find that I usually can do about 2 hours of writing at once. That's about the max for me a day. Right now, since I usually only have one chunk, and if I start to get over the 2 hour mark, it gets really slow, and I just get like kind of disengaged from what I'm doing. So right now, I'm probably working like, say, 10 to 12 hours a week on writing. Now and again, I can get a little half an hour in the evening if Grayson's napping or something, but not too much. And then just mixing in some marketing outside of that when I can.
What does your average writing week look like then? So you mentioned 10 to 12 hours of 2 hour spurts. That's, 5-6 days a week of writing. Do you have a scheduled time where you, set up a babysitter, or how does it work with your life?
Yeah, I usually about 3 days a week or so when I write, my mother-in-law will watch my son, and then on the weekend, on 1 or 2 days, my husband will watch him while I write, kind of depending on what we're doing that weekend. And then my dad and his wife as well will usually pitch in. So usually when I'm writing, I have a sitter of some sort. And now and again, like I said, I can maybe get something in on a nap if I'm feeling like extra inspired, or maybe took a day off and I want to see if I can make up a little bit. So my schedule is usually kind of flexible. Like, I don't like write between 10 and noon every day that I write, but mornings tend to work best for me personally. That's when my brain just runs the best creatively. So more often than not, it's sometime in the morning that I'm dropping off my son and then going and writing.
Do you have any set word counts when you go through those writing sprints, or is it just whatever I can get done in 2 hours? That's great, and I like that.
It's usually like how many writing little blocks I want to get in. So I kind of do the 25 minutes of writing, 5-minute break, and I can get 3 to 4 of those in. It just depends on the day, as far as like how fatigued my brain gets. And so I think when I do my best, I'm focused on that. And that can really vary for me. Sometimes it's 500 words in that 25 minutes, and sometimes it's 900. Depending on what type of scene it is, how well thought out the scene is, just how well my brain's working that day. So there's a lot of variation on word count. So I do better to focus on getting the time in and doing whatever I can in that time and staying as focused as I can in that 25 minutes. So putting do not disturb on my computer, like leaving my phone, on silent, turned over so I can check it, after, but not before I get done with that 25 minutes. And so that's when I'm doing my best writing. And some days it's just kind of getting in what I can, and I just don't feel like doing the writing sprints. But my best days are definitely focused on however many sprints I can get in and not worrying so much what the word count is. But like I always like when I have try to challenge myself to get in as many as I can. But sometimes that's really difficult for me if it's a very descriptive scene or something that doesn't come as natural to me personally. It's like writing dialogue does. So if it's a dialogue scene, I'm closer to the 900. And if it's a pretty big description heavy scene, it's probably 500 or maybe 6 if I'm lucky.
So when you're crafting a story, what usually comes first for you? The characters, the setting, or the plot?
I think just the world in general. So setting, but like the world, the type of magic, what kind of creatures there are, how the magic works. For my Whims of Fae series, I knew I really wanted my Fae to feed on emotion. That was just something that I really liked the idea of and wanted to go with. And so I started with that and then kind of built say the different Fae courts and what those magics look like and which one was I focusing on and what was going on there. And then most of the time I get a general idea and then I start to think about the characters and how they relate to each other. So far it's mostly the world itself that draws me in. And then I figure out who my characters are and how they fit into the world. And once I have those two pieces, I kind of build my plot from there. And try and let my characters drive my plot within this world I've imagined.
That's awesome. So we have an audience question, and it's if you could turn your books into movies or a TV series, would you?
Yeah, I think that would be really cool. Seeing, the world you thought in your head come to life would be a really amazing thing. So I think that would be a very cool dream to happen someday. And yeah, I think that would be awesome.
You rebranded your first series, Brielle Davis, and it became the Soul Crossing series with brand new covers, titles, and updated blurbs. Can you tell us about the decision to update it, or whether you found success in converting everything and updating it?
Yeah, so I redid those covers after and titles after I'd actually redone the covers for my Whims of Fae series, the books that had been out so far. I want to say 2 books in the Whims of Fae series out, and I had the more typical indie style girl on the front, digital image sort of thing going on, those type of covers. And I just have always been really drawn to the more traditional artistic, botanical type cover, like a Holly Black Cruel Prince or something like that. So, I just kind of partly from my heart, because I knew the indie books at that time in 2017 really leaned toward a person on the cover. And I just kind of went with my heart and had the covers done much more artistic, with like flowers and leaves and like a crown, like a drawing crown. And the illustrator I work with, she does watercolor. So it was a little bit even different in that sense. So once I changed those covers, I saw really pretty instant success that my ads were doing better. So I kind of committed to going that direction for the time being with my books. And I just wanted my first series to fit with my brand. And so that was the big reason for changing those, because that series has done okay, like when it was newer, but was never like a huge seller. So the decision for changing that particular series was actually more just to go with my brand slash, you know, let's throw something out there and see if it does any better. And so I just went with they're very different than my Whims of Fate like covers, but it's still an illustrated cover. And I used like a different font and different things for my author name just for branding purposes. But it wasn't it wasn't a big change like when I changed my Whims of Fate covers. I changed the titles. That was just kind of a tried thing. I'm not sure. I actually kind of miss the old titles, honestly, on that series, and I've considered rebranding and relaunching that whole series now. Even more to like the brand that I'm trying to do, but I have yet to do that.
Speaking of your Whims of Fae series, that is your longest series with 6 books. So do fans ever want more from your series? Would you ever consider continuing that series or writing more?
Yeah, so I actually did do a spinoff on that series that's called Whims of Witches.
Mhm.
And my Whims of Fae series is definitely set in our world, but mostly set in my realm of fairy. Whereas the new series is set more in our realm and has to do with a human character that gets magic powers and how that fits in with the fae that have come to our world. So I have done that, and I definitely think my really avid fans have like read it and really enjoyed it. I haven't marketed that one as much. It's been like figuring out, like, do I market that as a brand new series? Because it technically is one and you don't have to read my other series first. I'm still kind of in the midst of figuring out what I want to do with that. But it's been fun in a lot of ways to kind of take a different approach and have some, you know, cameos from some old characters and everything. But I also found that I think that's part of the reason the burnout started was I stayed in the same world for longer than I personally really should have. I probably should have taken a break and come back to it because I started to get bored. So that one I just wrapped up last October, though. I just made it a trilogy and I'm happy with how it ended. And I could see myself coming back to the world after I've written a series or two in a different world.
Oh, I was just gonna ask what your favorite and least favorite part about writing that series was.
I think my favorite part was the cameos and like just like kind of already knowing the world and going in. So that was an example of when I went into the new series and I didn't have to world build as much. It was just kind of a more natural transition. It's new main characters, brand new story arc. And I'd actually briefly set it up in this last book of the Whims of Fae series because I knew at that point I wanted to do the spinoff. So that was fun. That was it was a real nice way to just go into the same world, but a new story. So it was exciting. So that was my favorite part. And then I think my least favorite part, again, was just like by the time I was getting towards the end, I was ready for something new already.
Okay, so I think you mentioned a couple questions ago how you had redone the covers in your Whims of Fae series as well, because you wanted to match the brand and you want to do something a little bit different with the watercolor illustrations. And I'm considering redoing my covers as well, for my series that I have coming out, but probably doing it after it's all completed and published. So can you tell us the good and the bad of changing your covers, and how does that affect sales and marketing efforts?
I think I guess the bad is just the additional cost, right? Like, if you've already had them done and you have to do them again, it's more money and time and effort and everything like that. And then I think the positive is it can just put a new life on your books. That's what I found when I first changed my Whims of Fae series, a real drastic change because I happened to hit the market maybe more to where my books fit. And just visually they stood out more in the store to readers and just drew more readers in. It's actually kind of funny, like how, I mean, I will have people who like love my covers but don't like my book at all, and they like their reviews will like comment on that, like, this is a beautiful cover, but the story, and I just laugh. I'm like, well, at least I did a good job on the cover. So I'm like, I can't please them all. But yeah, I think that that's definitely the positive, is it can put a new life into your book. I chose to change my Whims of Fae series middle of the series because I think really felt just that they could maybe be better. And I just was like really at that time figuring out my brand and really wanted to go more that direction. I'm like, it's a tricky balance because I think with covers, you don't want to always follow your heart because, you know, sometimes you love something and it just doesn't work. So I definitely took a risk by doing that. And I'm grateful that what I love happened to resonate well with, you know, people seeing ads online, or my book, it just advertised in general, like online. So it's a risk too, in that sense, because you are putting money into something you aren't sure how it's going to happen. But I do think sometimes, you know, when you're first putting out a series, I know for me, when I first put out my first series, I didn't know as much and I didn't have the funds to do things as much. So I at least got my books out there. And so recovering them later definitely was an upgrade that I maybe couldn't have done, but at least I got my books out there first. So just the fact that, you know, you always can recover. And I've actually seen a young adult Fae series, it's like the Iron King or something is the first book. Julie, I forget her last name, is the author, and it's a series that I read as I think in like high school. But with the Fae, young adult Fae books being really popular now, the books that I have of it are like just like a image of like a regular photo image sort of edited of a person's face, and like now the traditional publisher has relaunched them with the more, you know, text heavy illustrated type cover. So I think that always knowing that you can rebrand something and make it fit what the current market is, because the market's always changing. It's just a really exciting thing. And that's part of why I love being an indie author. I have that control that at any point I can try it and see how it works.
We've mentioned a lot of things about going back and updating previous content, previous covers, etc. Would you have any interest in going back and working with Becca Harris, say on a new story within the Guardians of Elysium series, or would you want to just work with her in general again, or how would you move forward with that?
Yeah, so right now we have 2 books out in the series, the Guardians of Elysium, and it isn't wrapped up yet, so we definitely have to work together again and finish it. Our schedules have been a little crazy the last couple years, so it's currently they're currently paused. But that's something we both just love the process of so much. I think co-writing can be a different experience every time it happens. This is my only experience with it. And Becca's someone I know in person. She went to Spalding, where I went from MFA, and Shannon went. And so I just knew we got along so well. Our personalities are very similar. And it started very natural with that process. And so that was exciting, and something that it's actually one of the most times I've had fun writing, because I got to be a reader and a writer at this kind of back and forth. And since it was such a fun process, definitely something I think we will finish. And I could see us co-writing again in the future, because it's been fun, which is, you know, always great.
So what has been your favorite book to write so far?
Oh man, that's tough. I think probably my first Whims of Fae book is one that was really fun, because I really was excited about that world. And I think the one I'm writing now is right there with it. I think creating a new world is my favorite part, even though it's a little more time consuming. So those are definitely the 2 that have just let me explore a little bit more. And so they probably will be my top 2. I don't know if I could decide between, because the Whims of Fae series is finished. So I have a certain type of love for that. But the one I'm writing, I'm in the like new creation phase. So
I think I'm with you on that. When my current work is usually my favorite when I'm in the writing phase. And now I'm in the revising stage, and it's my least favorite, and I think the book is awful. But I've gone through this with every book I've written. So, so with that in mind, what has been your least favorite book to write?
Probably the book I just wrote before this one. It's the last book in my spinoff series, and I loved where the story went. It was a little bit of a challenge because I had planned at least 4 books in that series, and I decided to wrap it up in 3. But I did love where it went, but I was so ready for the series to be over that while I love what the product ended up being at the end, like the book ended as, the process was just a struggle because I really wanted to be working on this one I'm working on now because I'd already started the world building and had started writing in it just on the side. So this was the one where it felt the most like work. This last one I wrote, the Solitary Queen is what it's called, and it's the final book in my Whims of Witches series. So that one was the struggle, and it was right after the coming out of the burnout. So
Are you willing to tell us when your current work in progress can be expected, or even after that, what you'd like to work on next?
yeah, so I'm planning an end of April release for the current book I'm working on. It's called The Soul Throne, and it's the first book in a brand new young adult fantasy series. Total different world, not related to our world at all. And it has elves and lots of magic and lots of fun stuff. So that book will come out at the end of April. And then I'm just going to focus on that series for now. I do have some ideas for the next series I want to work on because I think that's one of my favorite things is coming up with ideas, like just general ideas of what type of world I want. But by the time I finish this series, my plans could change on that one. So this is definitely my focus at the moment, and it's the first book in the series. I'm planning maybe 6 to 7 books if things go well. That can definitely change based on how the story goes and how I'm feeling with it. But if that's the case, if I do the full 6, 7 books I want, I probably wouldn't wrap that up until next year. So.
Well, you have answered all of our questions, so thank you so much. Before we wrap up, can you please tell our listeners where they can find more about you, Instagram, whatever you want to send them to, and where they can find your books?
Yeah, so Instagram, I'm Nissa Leder, and Facebook, I'm Nissa Leder. Facebook/Nissa Leder, I think, on that one. And so I'm active on both of those semi-regularly. Definitely will get the most current release schedule, up to date, everything on either of those. And hopefully someday soon my website will be back up. And when it is, that'll be nissaleder.com. And then on Amazon, I write under Nissa Leder. Whims of Fae series is a 6-book finished one. So that's probably where I would suggest anyone wanting to check out my books to go first. Otherwise, watch out for The Soul Throne releasing at the end of April. And yeah.
Thank you again. And thank you to everyone for joining us today. I do want to especially thank you, Nissa, for your insight and experience. And we are planning to have A.F. Stewart come and be interviewed for our March 15th show. We will all invite you to enter the world of horror and fantasy, where she favors the dark and deadly in her writing. Goodbye, everyone. We'll see you next time.
Bye.
Bye.